Hello, everyone can hear my voice?
Yes, Mbak Vanessa.
Does my sound sound clearly? My voice sounds clearly?
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
Okay. Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today's seminar. My name is Vanessa Chahra. I'm going to be emceeing you in this webinar. This webinar is the continuation of session 1 this morning. Before we get started, I have to remind you, if you have any questions during the talk, you can type it into the question box in your Zoom control panel, or you can use raise hand menu in your Zoom if you want to ask directly to the speakers. You can speak either in Bahasa or English, it's okay. The moderator will help you to translate. Also, don't forget to get your name listed on the attendance list and feedback form as a requirement to get your certificate. The certificate will be sent to your email. Before we turn the time to the speakers, let me give you a brief introduction about them. So Professor Rosalind now is the director of Geothermal Institute of University of Auckland, New Zealand. And the second speaker is Dr. John, now is a lecturer and also a geothermal modeling expert of Geothermal Institute of University of Auckland, New Zealand. Both our speakers are the experts in geothermal field. Now, without further ado, let's turn the time to the moderator, Mr. Ronnie. I'm yours.
Thank you, Mbak Vanessa, for opening this afternoon session. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for all the participants that have joining us in this afternoon. My name is Ronnie. I will be the moderator for this session. Today, we are very lucky to have two well-known experts in geothermal energy, Professor Rosalind Archer and Dr. John O'Sullivan. As mentioned before, Professor Rosalind Archer is the director of the Geothermal Institute, University of Auckland. Geothermal Institute is focusing on education, knowledge transfer, and capacity building of geothermal energy. Also, it has spent many years in collaboration and partnership with Indonesia. Today, Professor Rosalind Archer will tell us how University of Auckland keeps standing as the top quality geothermal education during this pandemic. And now, without further ado, let's turn the time to Professor Rosalind Archer. The floor is yours, Professor.
Selamat siang. Thank you. It's really a pleasure to be online with you tonight. And in a more normal year, I would have probably traveled to Indonesia once or twice a year. But of course, we know that we don't live very normal times. So I have some slides to start to share, and we can go from there. So hopefully my slides are screen sharing. And what I'm going to do is, first of all, take you on a bit of a journey that celebrates the relationship that New Zealand and Indonesia have around geothermal energy and have had for a very long time. I'd also, before I go any further, like to acknowledge the Indonesian guests that we have engaged with the session: Professor Sukia Marianto, Professor Widodo, the Dean of Science, Dr. Dadan Gustiana from the Directorate General of Renewable Energy, and staff from the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources. And I'm sure in the audience we do have probably a number of other graduates from the Geothermal Institute in New Zealand over the years. So, New Zealand, as I'm sure you know, are pioneers in geothermal energy. So the shots I have on screen are historical ones of exploration in the Wairaki field in 1950. So that was one of the world's first geothermal exploration sites and came online with production of the world's first production from a liquid-dominated system in 1958. So it is a very old established site, and what we are very proud of is that that plant is still running strong. So sustainability in New Zealand matters to us a great deal. So production from Wairaki is still very high, very consistent, and they are going through a process of reinvigorating the plant and putting more modern plant in there in the coming years because they believe in the life of the reservoir. So it's real proof that geothermal can be a truly sustainable resource. So in slightly old data there, Wairaki by 2010 was 176 megawatts. If we go to kind of contemporary times, we were pioneers in geothermal, but we are still world leaders in geothermal. We are members of the Gigawatt Club. We now have 1,005 megawatts electrical installed. That supplies about 17, sometimes 18% of our electricity in this country. So that's very, very exciting. New Zealand has a tremendous heritage in renewable energy more generally. About 85% of our electricity is renewable because we also have very significant hydroelectricity generation. So we've been working in the geothermal sector for over 50 years in research and development, training, geothermal engineering, geothermal geoscience. Being a somewhat isolated island nation, we tend to have become very innovative in our own country. So we have always partnered with Indonesia. So we have been there working with Indonesia in geothermal right since the beginning of Indonesia's journey to become a significant geothermal generator. So this photograph here is a historical one that is the opening of Kamojang. And Kamojang here at the opening, this gentleman here is Sir Robert Muldoon, who was Prime Minister of New Zealand at the time, and he dedicated aid money to fund New Zealand geothermal experts who had already learned geothermal development through developing Wairaki to work with Indonesia on the development of Kamojang. So we're very, very proud that we were there at the beginning of your journey. And that relationship is maintained in a strong bilateral relationship. So you'll recognize on the slide, this is President Widodo, and New Zealand's current Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern in Indonesia in 2018, signing off an agreement on cooperation in renewable energy. And this agreement has clauses in it specifically supporting geothermal, around technical capacity building, and around education. So this is influencing our government's priorities today in terms of how our Ministry of Foreign Affairs chooses to dedicate their funding for continued support of the development of geothermal in New Zealand. Sorry, the development of geothermal in Indonesia. So how do we do that? At the University of Auckland, I am proud to be the director of the Geothermal Institute and also currently acting Deputy Dean of Engineering. But when I'm working in geothermal, I head the Geothermal Institute. That institute is, I have an image on the slide here of a multifaceted umbrella because it reaches across the campus across many different branches of activity: engineering, geoscience, law, environmental management, business, social science, all manner of things. And all of them are important to geothermal projects. So geothermal projects are about much more than just some geology, geophysics, geochemistry, some reservoir engineering. They have to be economic. They have to have real, genuine acceptance and buy-in from communities. They have to make sense environmentally. So if there are any issues around contaminants or non-condensable gases, those all have to be managed. So I like the fact that geothermal is so multifaceted. So in my role at the university, I aim to coordinate all our expertise. And we have probably on the order of 40 staff who have some interest in geothermal. Some of those staff, like Mike O'Sullivan and John O'Sullivan, it is their passion. It is pretty much all they do every day. Other staff in that mix include geothermal in a wider portfolio of activity. So here are some shots from a kind of a student perspective of our postgraduate certificate in geothermal, which leads into our Master of Energy program. And many of the people in these photos are our Indonesian students. I'm not sure which year this was taken. It's not too old. But this is taken during our field work. So the program includes 2 weeks in the field, looking at both geoscience and engineering topics, and really getting to observe how geothermal is implemented in this country. And it's something that we really partner with the geothermal companies to open up their sites. They are very generous to the students in terms of potentially conducting well tests and giving them real hands-on experience of what goes on those sites. And on the geoscience side of things, we are lucky to have lots of wonderful surface features, lots of really interesting geology that is very accessible. So it's quite easy to go into the field in New Zealand. We work more broadly through the Geothermal Institute and through the university in other renewables. So the degree that we offer, called the Master of Energy, can be used to focus on all sorts of renewable energy topics. And that training can be outside of a degree. So we offer training programs specifically for companies, for governments, for different agencies, or as aid projects. So this image here is our non-degree programs where we've been commissioned directly to work with clients. And back in 2019, when we could travel, I counted up that our training programs just in 2019 reached participants in at least 25 different countries. The work in Africa is funded as aid projects, but a lot of the rest is funded commercially. So a little more detail on what we do in the Institute. So we have a very strong pillar of education and human capability building. So why would you want to talk to us about your education needs? Well, first of all, because we are world famous for geothermal, world leaders in geothermal, because we're very well connected, very well integrated in between academia and industry. So the students who study with us can work on often real field data, go on field trips, and really participate in New Zealand's entire geothermal ecosystem. And if you study with us, you become part of our network of alumni. So we have over 2,000 students who've studied with us so far in geothermal, and they are all over the world, absolutely all over the world, and often in very senior positions, some of them now, and that can facilitate further international collaboration. So our program is either the postgraduate certificate in geothermal. If you want to extend the program a bit and broaden it, you can study in our Master of Energy program, or you can work with us through non-degree short courses. So to build in a little more detail on that, the postgraduate certificate in geothermal is a 6-month program, well, probably 5 months really. It's one semester, and it starts in July each year. It has components on geoscience and on engineering, and it has guest lecturers from GNS, our Geoscientific Geological Survey, from New Zealand Industry. And Pri Utami normally travels to New Zealand, comes from her home base at Gajah Mada University, and does a guest block of lectures that obviously hasn't been possible lately. And Pri is going to be possibly very busy as Vice President of the International Geothermal Association, which is fantastic exposure for Indonesia. So we're very, very proud of Pri and very impressed by that. So as I said earlier, the postgraduate certificate has 2 field trips, so the totals up to 2 weeks, and it has a short individual research project. And then at the end of the postgraduate certificate, that's normally the timing when the New Zealand Geothermal workshop takes place. So often, if students are able to, they get to stay in New Zealand to go to the Geothermal workshop in November. If you want to do a somewhat more substantial qualification, you can do the Masters, the Master of Energy, which is either 1 year, so a further 6 months after the postgraduate certificate courses, or depending on your prior background and experience, we may offer you a 1.5-year version, just depending what requirements we have academically to make sure that your total package of study meets the requirements for a New Zealand master's degree. So in the Master of Energy, you can study topics on any energy source: wind, solar, biomass, geothermal. We're not strictly not limited to renewables. So occasionally we get students doing fossil fuels, but very rarely. And nobody studies nuclear because New Zealand is proudly nuclear free in terms of energy. The key difference between the postgraduate certificate and the Master of Energy is, first of all, that it adds in content from the business school. So everyone in the program has to take a business school class that we share with them that looks at energy markets, policy and regulation. So you can help understand the kind of wider landscape of energy projects. It has a larger research project, so there is a much more substantial research project, and often students may bring data for that project from home. That if they are going back to employment at home, they may bring data from their company. So I've got some examples here of students who've done master's degrees. You can also do a full research master's. So the Master of Energy includes the classes, but if you've already got quite a detailed background, you can do solely research. Typically either as a Master of Science, if you want to do geoscience, or a Master of Engineering. And that is solely writing a research project, a thesis. So I've got some recent project examples, conveniently from Indonesian students. So Muhammad recently finished up a project in geoscience, working with Julie Rowland. So Muhammad came to us from Pertamina Energy, and here he's looking at geological modelling, looking at understanding permeability and constructing 3D models. And then the final sort of level of qualification is the PhD. So the PhD is 3.5 years or so. The university says 3.5 years. It sometimes turns into 4 years or more. Everyone in the PhD program is working with 2 academic staff at a minimum, a main supervisor and a co-supervisor. And sometimes they may come from different places. So at the moment I supervise, for example, as an engineer, I co-supervise with a professor in law to look at the role of reservoir modelling in regulation. The university offers our PhD students 2,900 New Zealand dollars per year in support for your work, for your project. So they help pay for any research related travel, if you're going to conferences that need travel, if you have research costs in terms of gathering data, things like that. So I have another example on screen here from an Indonesian student, Husni, who has worked on steam field design in his PhD, and he's applied that to Lubelu back home in Indonesia. And then finally, there are short courses. So Ronnie features in this slide, where we have a range of short course topics that are pretty much ready to go. Everything from a kind of introductory Geothermal 101 course, where we introduce people to geothermal technology, through to more detailed reservoir engineering, reservoir modeling programs, a program on teaching people Python, especially if you're a geoscientist, project management, and any number of courses that we do customized specifically to client needs. And these short courses, here's an example of Ronnie and John working together on a course, are, you know, flexible and able to be delivered online. In particular, you may have heard of our project management course. So our project management course is a really exciting offering funded by New Zealand's Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade. And it's project management in the sense of thinking about what does it really take to move a project forward. So yes, there are some classic kind of project management techniques in there about some classic project management tools, but there's a lot of technical geothermal content in there to say, how do we progress our projects? What sort of data do we need? When do we need it? Where are the roadblocks likely to be? So we developed this a few years ago and have been teaching it in New Zealand every year. It's a 4-week block and the students are in class pretty much 8 hours a day for 4 weeks, so it's intense. We do this in both geothermal and wider renewables. In 2020, we fitted in the wider renewable one. Those students finished, they finished during the start of COVID. COVID was starting to emerge in February. So many of the students returned to their home countries wearing masks and having to go into isolation and those kind of things in February, March of 2020. But we didn't have time to get the geothermal course in. However, we've been negotiating with our Ministry for Foreign Affairs because this course has become something that people know and enjoy and really want us to do. So we have an agreement to take it online. My slides say online March 2020. I mean March 21. So we're just getting ready in the next few weeks to launch that. We'll be spreading it out because I don't think anyone wants to be in a Zoom meeting 8 hours a day for 4 weeks straight. We live in a lot of Zoom meetings these days. So we're changing the format slightly, but the material will be the same. And we're really trying to create ways for people to interact, including the group business case contest. I don't think we'll be able to include this exercise. So often as an icebreaker to get people to know their teams, I assign them a project. In this case, the project involves building a tower out of spaghetti and marshmallows. So I don't think I can do that online, but I'll think of something else. Now, one other thing that people are always very interested in is scholarships. That if you want to study with us, you should definitely grab this link because this link takes you to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and their scholarship program is open now. So if you want to study here, we are taking applications for Ministry of Foreign Affairs scholarships. You must apply via the ministry. We don't have a role in the selection, but definitely grab that link and go online. Applications opened, I think probably 1st of February, typically for a month or so. And then obviously from the Indonesian side, there is usually scholarship money from LPDP and DICTI, but I know during COVID, most agencies are reconsidering their programs. So I'm unsure on the status of those at the moment. On the research side of things, I will just make a few remarks about the work that we do. So this example is a forecast, and we run a lot of reservoir models to make forecasts. So this is forecasting total steam production versus time. And what we're used to seeing from our reservoir models is just one number or one line. But what often our commercial clients want is they want to understand the uncertainty in terms of, you know, is the steam production going to be 1500 plus or minus 50 or plus or minus 500? Because that influences the economics and the decision making. So as just one example of the research we do, we're building mathematical tools to give people that uncertainty, that captures subsurface uncertainty and translates it into the impact above ground. We're also interested in above ground processes. So this slide is from one of our other Indonesian students who finished a few years back. And he's looking at two-phase computational fluid dynamics models, where he's comparing the performance of different separator designs and trying to understand which is the best, how they can be optimized in terms of their size and their shape. So these colors are plotting out fluid velocity through the separator. And then the other pillar, so we've thought about education, we've thought a little bit about research. Our research capability is very diverse, so those were just two small examples. Is consulting. So our geothermal team, Mike O'Sullivan, John O'Sullivan, working with people like Ronnie and others, love to solve unusual problems. They love doing difficult things. So I have a slide on screen from John's work in Lahire in Papua New Guinea, where he's looking at the interaction of a geothermal system with a mining operation. And that's challenging because in a mining operation, the ground surface is constantly moving because they're excavating the mine. So as you can imagine, that excavation changes the subsurface pressures, which changes everything continually. So it is one of the most unusual geothermal models in the world. But we like hard problems. So in terms of where we are right now, early 21, I did want to include some material on COVID to give you a sense of what COVID is like for us. So New Zealand has been hailed as a world leader in our response to COVID. I have the graph here of our cases versus time from the start of COVID. And we were only maxing out. Admittedly, we only have 4.5 million people in the country, so we are small compared to Indonesia. But this curve is the number of cases per day. So even on the very worst days in New Zealand, we were only having 90 cases a day. Through this period here, this peak, we went into lockdown very quickly. So we locked down in late March. There was a hard lockdown for about 5 weeks. And then our case numbers essentially went to zero. Auckland had another small spike. So Auckland had another 4-week lockdown in this phase, whereas the rest of the country did not. And all of this transmission is generally, these other cases through here are cases that come across our border. So to enter New Zealand now, you need to stay in a government managed hotel. And that's where these cases are happening. We have no community transmission. We are absolutely privileged to live life as normal, except that we have to wear a mask if I catch a domestic flight or public transport in Auckland. And of course, I don't fly overseas anymore. I describe myself as a former frequent flyer. So our border is closed to non-citizens, and we appreciate that is very challenging for anyone who wants to get an education here in New Zealand, because currently there are some limited exemptions, but currently our border is closed to people who are not New Zealanders. But as I say on the slide there, our hearts and our minds are open. So we really have tried to transition as much as possible online. So my colleagues and I are online a lot at various hours of the day. I have another Zoom session after this to connect with Europe. And we do that because we love to interact with people who love geothermal from all over the world. So we will stay connected even if my passport is locked away in a filing cabinet and it won't be used. So what does that mean for our geothermal program? Well, traditionally our geothermal program has only ever been taught face-to-face. It's very hands-on. It involves a lot of field work, laboratories. But we did take all our geothermal classes online during the lockdown. The Master of Energy classes are a little different. They're more traditional lecture style classes that lend themselves quite well to being online anyway. So we had already had students taking them online. Traditionally, that wasn't available to international students. It was only available to domestic students. So I had always had some local students who might have been working professionals, might have lived in another city, but wanted to do the masters. So we've always had those students online. But now New Zealand Immigration has said that international students are able to enroll online in courses from New Zealand. You do not need a visa. You don't need a visa, and you can enroll part-time. So what we're sort of encouraging people to do if they want to study with us, maybe just start by taking 1 or 2 classes online now to get a beginning for your program. And then we're hoping the borders will open. As you know, I can't promise you when. I don't believe our borders will be open in time for our July intake. I'm much more hopeful that the borders open for our February intake next year. But doing some part-time study could well be a solution. So what would that study look like? I mean, much like most universities, we have quite sophisticated learning management systems where people can access all the course materials, whether that's recordings, whether that's links for live sessions, whether that's quizzes and polls. We have web forums for some text-based interaction. And we do have, because we have local students involved, we do have a blended environment. So you're in an environment where there are students working locally, and that often helps professors when we're recording. At least if we have a small audience locally, it can make it somewhat easier for us. And we did still get partly out into the field. So we didn't have to cancel all of our field work, though we did scale it back a bit. So this was mid-year between lockdowns, farewelling the last of our 2020 Master of Energy class. Some of these folks were making their way back to Indonesia. And it was actually a really sad day to see them go, because the master's class, I assure people, gives me a lot of energy. So we do miss having such a big and such a diverse master's class in person, but we know that there are definitely people out there doing great things through our online programs. We also took the New Zealand Geothermal workshop online. So that's a conference normally for about 300 geothermal professionals. This year we had 225 people from New Zealand who wanted to connect, wanted to be in the same room. So that room actually was largely full of people, but we had another 75 people who joined our conference online, and we created a blended environment. So we had some talks that came in from Indonesia for our New Zealand conference. So this is just a small amount of the IT that was involved in one of the session rooms. So again, there's some links there. Be quite long, but I think this talk is being recorded and going out on YouTube. So there's links there to our education programs, the Institute itself, and the site to apply to the university. So I would like to wrap up. Terima kasih banyak. Very happy to take questions. Very happy to stay connected. So if you're into LinkedIn, just search for me on LinkedIn. Probably the easiest way is just to put my name, Rosalind Archer, into the search bar. And the Geothermal Institute also has a page of its own on LinkedIn. We are on Twitter from time to time at Geothermal Institute. My email address is there, and I try to keep up with my email, but can't promise you I achieve it all of the time, but I try. Anyway, very happy to take comments or questions, so thank you.
Thank you very much, Rosalind, for the insightful information. Now we know how the University of Auckland coped with the pandemic situation and continuing its long-standing tradition of top quality geothermal education. and also what opportunities are available for us right now. We already know that even though in the pandemic condition, University of Auckland still open for the geothermal course and postgraduate program and Master of Energy. And in fact, currently the New Zealand Science Scholarship is opening, so it's a big chance for us Indonesian geothermal practitioners to submit an application for the scholarship and joining in the geothermal program in University of Auckland. I believe a lot of participants are interested with this topic, and therefore I will open for the discussion session. If there is any participant have question, you can ask directly to Professor Rosalind Archer. Anyone who has question?
It's me.
Oh, okay, Pak Hasani. Please, Pak, you can ask Professor Rosalind.
Okay, thank you, moderator. Well, I'm Kasani from UGM, and nice
Hello.
to meet you again, Rosalind.
Yes.
Okay, welcome to Indonesia virtually. Okay, well,
Okay, yes.
maybe I don't want to ask a question, but maybe like a confirmation only. Okay, well, I was in Auckland University or Geothermal Institute in 1996, long time ago.
Yes.
And well, at the time, of course,
Not very long.
the name was Geothermal Institute. But if I'm not mistaken, in 2002 maybe. So the Geothermal Institute or the program of the diploma course is like stopped. And then the institution or the organization changed a little bit and now becomes GI again. And now you are the director. So what I want to confirm is what's the main difference between the situation Geothermal Institute before 2002 and the present Geothermal Institute in terms of
right, yes, good
everything.
question.
Yeah, just because yeah, okay.
I think that the difference before 2002 essentially relates to some arrangements with our government. That before 2002, our government were funding the institute directly. They took that funding away. So things did go a bit quiet for a few years. And then we negotiated with the different government ministries and were able to get government support now for scholarships direct to the students. The institute itself gets no specific government funding anymore, where it did used to have dedicated government funding when it was doing the postgraduate diploma. So it's really the underlying funding situation that has changed. The diploma course hasn't been brought back in that name. It has become the Master of Energy course. So the diploma course had more very specific geothermal content. And when we were talking at least to New Zealand companies, they were more interested in having a little more breadth. So having the business content added into the masters. If people want to stay purely technical, you could do the Master of Science or the Master of Engineering. So I guess that's the main difference. So yeah, I kind of restarted the Geothermal Institute in its current format in 2013.
Okay, thank you for the update.
Yes, thank you, Kasani.
Thank you very much, Pak Kasani, for your question. Okay, we still open for the next question. If there is any participant want to ask to Rosalind.
Me?
Oh,
May I?
okay. Pak
Yes.
Adi, please.
Yeah, thank
Yeah,
you very much, uh, Ronnie. Yeah,
yeah,
yes. Good afternoon here, Rosalind and Ronnie is my son.
Oh,
yeah.
Yes, my question is, I am from Baravijaya University here, and my department is geophysics here, and we often discuss with Ronnie about the processing and so on because my field is geophysics here. Anyway, what I want to ask is, in 1990s, I think, I went to Kamojang uh, geothermal field, and when I went there with the group, they explained that this is collaboration between Indonesia and New Zealand, this
Mhm.
brand. And I think this New Zealand is, yes, high rank for the geothermal uh, area. We are in East Java. We also have about 13 fields of geothermal here. This quite big and quite a lot of geothermal fields. Is it possible if collaboration between my university and the University of Auckland one day? And yeah, we have many equipment here for geothermal measurement, and also yes, we can do the research together. Maybe the field is here, and we try to open the collaboration between our universities and uh, Auckland University. And actually, Ronnie also now starting his PhD. Probably next one day, I will visit my
Mhm.
uh, grand uh, granddaughter there. While visiting my
That would be
granddaughter. So
wonderful.
yes, I also visit the University of Auckland. Thank you.
Yes, I hope you can come to visit. We're definitely very open to all sorts of collaboration. I think what we find is probably the easiest way to start collaborations is via students. So especially if there are masters or PhD students who want to maybe study in New Zealand, but want to bring data sets from Indonesia, want to do field experiments in Indonesia, then those student projects can become a great vehicle to get everyone talking more closely. So yeah, I think I would love to come and visit your university when I can finally travel again.
Yes,
So
yes, this
I would,
occasion.
Yeah,
because I don't think I have ever been to your university. I've been to several of the others, but I should, yes.
yeah,
Yes,
yes, Rosalind. Actually, Professor Adi Susilo is my father-in-law. He was the ex-dean of Faculty of Science in University of Brawijaya, and University Brawijaya is the pioneer of geothermal research in the eastern part of Indonesia. So yeah, Brawijaya focusing on the eastern part of Indonesia in terms of geothermal area, and that's why I try to pursue a chance to be collaborated between Brawijaya University and University of Auckland, since Brawijaya already quite advanced in terms of study in the geophysics, because as we know, geophysics is our first tool to see the subsurface condition. Even with the drilling condition of geothermal field, sometimes we find uncertainty because a lot of foggy or low circulation zone that we cannot predict it. And I hope in the future, with the collaboration between University of Auckland and University of Brawijaya, we can develop a new method or approachment to identify the hazardous potential hazardous area in the geothermal well, and also
Mhm.
it will be great for future drilling activities in geothermal field. because we can reduce a lot of risk and uncertainty in terms of drilling.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm glad Pakadi was able to introduce you into the world of geothermal.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mas Salim. Thank you very much. That's why I encourage everyone in here to know about University of Auckland.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Adi. Maybe
Mas
there is,
Roni, ya.
yeah, yes,
Mas
Pak.
Roni? Oh, Mas Yunus
Ya,
Daud. Oke, Pak
saya
Yunus.
Yunus Daud.
Oh ya, monggo silakan Pak Yunus.
Jih, matur nuwun. Hello, Roselyn.
Hello.
Yeah, hopefully you still remember me in 2015 as 17. Sorry, I met
Yes.
you in New Zealand geothermal workshop in Rotorua, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Actually, I was also a student in Auckland University in 1995, long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Again, it can't possibly be that long ago.
Yeah. I was with Professor Hochstein and Dr. Supriyadi, Dr. Supri Sumkono at the time. Yeah. Actually, I'm a geophysicist, and right now I manage a master program in geothermal exploration in University of Indonesia since 2012 until now. Yeah, hopefully will be continuing for the future, even the situation like right now, the pandemic situation. Okay, actually, thank you very much for your presentation. Today we got information, very invaluable information related to the educations in Auckland University, master course and short course and PG certain, something like that. Actually, my question is related to the exploration aspect of the master program. In the past, there is Professor Hochstein and focusing in exploration, Derek Frishton, Cassidy, and something, and other experts. What the condition right now? Is it possible to learn for students from Indonesia or all over the world to learn exploration? Of course, with modeling or something other engineering, but focusing in exploration.
No, we are very mindful that we had, such wonderful experts permanently on our staff with Manfred and Dr. Freestone and other people, and that they have, since retired. So for exploration specifically, that's probably an area where we bring guest lecturers from industry and from GNS science that the university has not quite found anybody like Manfred to take on that role in the geosciences inside the university. We definitely have some very good people who look at quite fundamental geoscience questions, but no, we bring in some other guests right now to work on exploration topics.
Okay.
But New Zealand is such a small country that we all just work together. Okay, sure.
Yeah. Okay. The second question is related to in the pandemic situation right now. A master course. Yeah, even you already explained. I need more information related to the pandemic situation. Is it fully online or part online and part?
We essentially now do both because because for people in New Zealand, we have no restrictions. So our university is completely open. You know, I go to class, and when the undergraduates come back in March, assuming nothing has changed, I will be able to teach in a theatre with 500 people in it, sitting shoulder to shoulder, no social distancing.
Yeah.
But we are very conscious that we will still have international students who are not able to travel. So we're essentially teaching in both modes, that we teach face-to-face and we teach online at the same time. And I think that is actually making it in many ways a richer experience, because I can bounce around questions with the face-to-face students live, and then the remote students either get that also live or get that recorded an hour or two later. So we're finding it's working quite well, but it has obviously been a journey. We've all had to learn you know, a lot of new technologies, upgrade, you know, various technical services behind the scenes to make it all work. But no, we're finding that students who are motivated and want to study with us online can participate just as well and are getting very, very good marks.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's enough. My question. Thank you very much, Rosaline, Mas Roni, Pak Sukir Marianto. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Pak Yunus Daud.
Yunus,
Okay.
terima kasih, Pak
For
Yunus.
Thank
asking.
you.
Yeah. Maybe Pak Sukir, you want to ask to Professor Rosaline after?
Yes, actually my question is already delivered by Pak Yunus regarding to the many course at GIE. Maybe I would like to add my colleagues, Pak Adi, that is asked regarding to the collaboration in the research of geothermal in eastern of Indonesia. Is it possible to make some any collaboration in education and service of community service regarding to the education of community about the geothermal? Maybe we would like to get some information or education how the New Zealand educate the people regarding to the education. So there is no any refusing or something rejection if there is any development of geothermal in some location. That's only my question.
Yeah, no,
Thank you,
that's a really interesting question, because we are very aware that community acceptance of geothermal is a very important issue in Indonesia, and it's, yeah, I'm not quite sure what the answer is. I mean, we sometimes have Master of Energy students who come out and do have an interest in that space. So we've had a couple of master's students who have kind of looked at reviews of different topics in that space, but unfortunately, I think probably the staff member, we had a staff member with interests in this area in kind of public policy. She is not a New Zealander, and she has decided for whatever reason that she is going to move back to her home country. I think COVID has motivated her decision making. So yeah, it's an area that I would like to pursue, and it's actually an area that I've been pushing the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, because one thing I notice when I travel is that people who work on community engagement in many different countries often feel quite isolated. That engineering, geology, they get all the attention, but community engagement is not getting so much attention. So one thing I would actually like to do somehow through our Ministry of Foreign Affairs would be actually to create a network of people working on community engagement, you know, probably through the entire Ring of Fire, even up through South America. You know, I've been to Japan, I've heard the same challenges, Chile has challenges. So I think possibly it's not so much a role for people coming to the university to learn, but I would love somehow to facilitate a network of people working in that space to learn from each other. I think that would be incredibly useful. I just haven't quite figured out how to convince the government to support it, but it's on my list.
Okay, thank you very much, Rosalind. Yeah, I think it is right, Professor Sukir, that we need to try to getting on the community engagement to educate local community about geothermal, and we need to start that action soon, because in Indonesia, if we want to expedite the geothermal development process, we need to also educate all the people. Uh, in fact, we also need a lot of expert in geothermal, and I think pandemic bring us the any very exciting chance for us to doing this course online, since a lot of geothermal engineer want to pursue master degree in University of Auckland, but they cannot go to Auckland. But there is a solution right now. We can do it online, so they don't have to resign from their company. They can study it together with their work also. I think if there is any question from other participants before I finish the first session with Professor Rosalind Arthur. Okay, I think there is no question. Thank you very much, Rosalind, for your time and valuable information to us. And if there is any question for the participant, you can directly contact Rosalind through her LinkedIn account, and also feel free to contact me if you anything else. I think we already have John in here. Good morning, John. I know it's a bit morning for your time right now in UK. I'm sorry for disturbing you.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, John.
Well, good afternoon, good
John.
evening, Rosalind.
Thank you for
Yeah.
tuning in.
Yeah, it's great. We can combine three different work time in one webinar in here. And for the second session, we will have Dr. John O'Sullivan. He is a lecturer and geothermal modeling expert of the University of Auckland, Geothermal Institute, University of Auckland. Dr. John O'Sullivan and his team have developed the best practice in geothermal modeling development. They also have cutting-edge technologies for developing geothermal models. We might have heard that running reservoir simulation takes a long time. However, when we use University of Auckland's geothermal tools, that might not be the case. So in the second session, John will talk about how important it is to build the geothermal model since the exploration phase and the values derived from that process. This is one of the innovations that we could apply in the current Indonesian geothermal exploration program. Now, without further ado, let's turn the time to the Dr. John O'Sullivan. The floor is yours, John.
Thank you very much, Roni. And thank you for the opportunity to talk today, particularly to Professor Sukir and Professor Widodo and Dr. Kustiana and all the staff at the Ministry of Energy and Minerals Resources of Indonesia. It's really great to have the opportunity to talk to you all. Let me just share my screen. Okay. Are you all, has my screen come up okay?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Okay. So as Roni said, this morning I'm going to talk about geothermal modelling in the exploration phase and how important it is. Just to give you some of my background, for those of you that aren't familiar with me, I'm at, as Roni said, I'm at the Geothermal Institute in the University of Auckland. I work as a lecturer on some of the programs that Rosalind's been discussing, and I do a lot of research, but I also spend a lot of time working as a consultant doing geothermal reservoir modeling for commercial projects. I'm the leader on several geothermal reservoir modeling projects around the world, in New Zealand and the USA, Iceland, Papua New Guinea, and in Indonesia as well. I studied with Rosalind in New Zealand and also at Stanford University. And I've been running these sorts of complex models for a very long time now, for about 25 years. And it's my focus really is geothermal reservoir modeling and the different modeling tools, inverse modeling, uncertainty quantification, scripting, that kind of thing around making geothermal reservoir modeling work as best as possible. So I know you guys you've all had a very interesting, rich discussion so far, and we're talking about geothermal exploration in particular. And the geosciences tools have really improved. There's been a lot of improvement, and in my time working in geothermal, we see better tools, better interpretation, better sensors. But the methods for really how we then use that information to select where to drill in an exploration setting, that hasn't really changed. And it's still based on expert knowledge and subjective interpretation of that geoscience data, which is fine, but there really is an opportunity to do better, to innovate. And in the Indonesian geothermal exploration workflow that's being developed, there's an opportunity to do more, use more modern tools to try to add value to that process. And the geothermal reservoir modeling tools that we've developed at the Geothermal Institute have also improved significantly in the last few years while we've been working on them. We have an integrated workflow for geothermal modeling, which I've presented with Roni and with Rosalind in Indonesia over the last few years. And it's widely adopted now in lots of our projects and in other projects as well. And we have some new fast simulation tools. I say new, they've been around for a few years now, but they're still new to the industry. And so they've been well benchmarked and tested now. And these allow us to really efficiently investigate the potential of geothermal resource in a way that's consistent with all of that pre-drilling geoscientific data. And so we can support the exploration drilling with reservoir modeling tools to really add value and reduce risk. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. The way this slide's really just presenting how we think about reservoir modeling in our team in the Geothermal Institute and with geoenergists. We use these robust and proven approaches that have now been tested and benchmarked extensively to carry out the modeling. And we've run them on lots of different projects now, large projects, greenfield site projects, and fully developed projects as well. And we know that they work well. We know the modeling tools work well and give good results quickly. The other aspect of that is not only are they robust and proven, but because we've used them many times, it shows how transferable they are. It's easy to apply the same approach to different projects, and different people have used them many times. I've now used this approach with several, at least 10 students over the last 3 or 4 years. And so it shows how transferable the knowledge and the approaches are. And this robustness, the testing and the transparency and transferability make it a really reliable approach. The second aspect is that the approach we use really combines all the expertise from the geosciences, engineering and management, and pulls it together so we're working as a team. So that regardless of your background on the webinar today, we'd all be working together and pulling in information together. And so we are able to then, it really supports the decision making and making sure that it's evidence-based decision making. Everyone's contributing knowledge, and we make good decisions as a result of that. And so you're applying best practices and reliability, and by combining them together in the approach we're using, you really make sure that you're adding value, delivering value from the modeling. One of the things that we're so passionate about in our group is that modeling is not something you do just to tick a box to say you did the modeling. The modeling must add value to the project. It must deliver value and continue to deliver value. So, and we measure that by seeing the confidence in the decisions, that is improved confidence because of good modeling. And we see that those good decisions contribute to the success and sustainability of projects. So this is how we really think about modeling and how we push it in our group. So the integrated modeling workflow, which we have discussed before in Indonesia, but I'll just talk again about it briefly, is this idea that by using a common tool set, we use Leapfrog Geothermal and combine it with scripting tools and PyTorch and visualization tools, our software TIM, and along with Tough2 and Wyware, our simulation tools. We pull them together so that really the conceptual model drives the entire modeling process. So all of the data, the geosciences, environmental monitoring data is all pulled into the conceptual model in a way that's really consistent, ensures a consistent interpretation and a well-documented interpretation. And then that conceptual model is closely coupled to the numerical model. This is the reservoir model here at the bottom. And that they're really closely coupled together through Leapfrog. And so there's a consistent and clearly documented conceptual model. It's easily visualized in 3 dimensions. It's easy to communicate. That's a really key part, is that experts from all across the fields can communicate clearly because they can look at the 3D visualizations. It's clear to all of the experts what you're talking about, where in the geothermal system, because you're all using a common source of information, which is the Leapfrog visualization of the conceptual model, and that relates directly to the reservoir model. Not only do you have this ability to communicate clearly and visualize clearly what you're all discussing, but this process actually enables us to do things faster. It means that we can update the conceptual model easily, and then those updates flow through to the numerical model, the reservoir model, so it streamlines that process. And as I'll talk about, one of the focuses for our discussion today is that this process really streamlines not just the update, but it makes it much faster and reduces the effort required for setting up the reservoir models initially. So they can be developed earlier during exploration phase and relatively cheaply because it doesn't take very long. So yeah, so this is the integrated modeling workflow that we've been applying regularly for the last 3 to 4 years now. In terms of, if we just focus on exploration modeling, then we're looking at data. We don't have any natural state data or production data, so we're really just pulling in information from the geosciences and the 2D conceptual model. So already the analysis that's been carried out of that data. And so And then the tools we use for the modeling stage, we're using, as I said, Leapfrog from Sequent, and we use AU-Tough2, which is the Auckland University version of Tough2. We use our own new modern simulator, Waiwera. We use our visualization software, TIM, and we use the Python library, scripting library, PyTough. And these are what combine to carry out our exploration modeling. So these tools, I'll just talk about them briefly. AU-Tough2 is the Auckland University version of Tough2 that is improved from the Berkeley version. We've had a long collaboration with Berkeley. I remember when I was 6 years old going with my father, Professor Mike O'Sullivan, to Berkeley, and I didn't know at the time, but he was going to work on Tough2. That was in 1980. So our team's been working with Berkeley for a very long time, and we have a close relationship with them. And so Berkeley stopped actively supporting Tough2 a few years ago, and Auckland University has carried on supporting Tough2 for continuously for the last 40 years, and we have members of our team that work on Tough2 consistently at the moment, and so AU-Tough2 has actually moved ahead of Tough2. They're consistent and give the same results, but AU-Tough2 runs better and faster and is easier to use. So we have an agreement with Berkeley that if you have a Tough2 license, then we will freely share AU-Tough2 with you. Now, TIM is the name of our visualization and calibration tool. It's developed in Python and works with all kinds of versions of Tough2, and it's free and open source. And here is a link for where you can download it. So I use TIM all day, every day. It's open. There's usually 2 or 3 windows of it open on my desktop. PyTough is our powerful scripting library for geothermal reservoir models that allow you to interact, control, and set up models, post-process models from Tough2. And it again is free and open source, and this is the download link. And this is really, PyTough is really the key to working the way we work, because it simplifies and automates so much of what we do that makes us able to do things very efficiently. Waiwera is our new geothermal simulator that's been developed over the last 6 years now, supported by the New Zealand government and also by our industry partners. It is a replacement for Tough2. It runs exactly the same algorithm as Tough2, but it does it using modern parallel code. It's also free for download. It's much faster and runs in parallel, as I said. There's documentation on the website as well. And hopefully later this year, we'll be starting courses running, showing how to use Waiwera as well. So in terms of how we build our models, so I'm going to talk a little bit about our model construction. So the key is that what we want to do is build models that capture as much of the real system as possible and really remove bad assumptions. There's so many things that we don't know in geothermal reservoirs and particularly at the exploration phase, that it's really important to include the things we do know and really important to leave out the things we know are wrong, because, as I said, there's so many unknowns. We don't want to add in bad assumptions. And the other key is we need models that can deliver results on time, that can be developed on time and can be run on time. So what we do for the geology, we often, in terms of the representation, we want to group geological units together to simplify the model representation in Leapfrog. There's often too much heterogeneity in a representation of the geology, particularly when there have been some wells drilled. But so this is less of a problem when we're dealing with exploration models. We try to keep things simple and think about the fluid transport properties rather than, it's less important the ages of the geology and more important to think about how they might be behaving in terms of fluid transport. When we don't know, when there's no information present, then we follow geological principles and we use analogies. This is an important point. There's lots of experience amongst the people in the webinar. There's already been a lot of exploration in Indonesia and around the world, which can provide us analogs for the system we might be exploring. So use that information as well. And we always use anisotropic permeabilities to represent the fracture trends so that we can ensure that there is some representation of preferential flow direction. We always include the major structures in our models, and where we're not sure if a structure is important or not, we'll include it because it's much easier to give it the same properties as the background host geology in the model later on in the process than it is to try to add it in later. So we include structures explicitly, and the structures have to follow geological principles. So that means that faults can enhance permeability along the strike of the fault or up the dip, and they can act as barriers across the fault as well. And we include the geophysical data. So we will interpret where alteration and where the clay cap might be and include that as well. So this is an example of Roni's model that Roni and I have been working on of Way Island. This is in Aceh province. This is the Jarboy geothermal system here. And so you can see this is a geological model that Roni's developed. We can see the different geologies, the younger volcanics on top, which we're going to remove. And then there's the upper quaternary is the orange, and the mid quaternary is the yellow. And here we've got that's lower quaternary is the purple. And then we're onto this is down into the tertiary sediments. And then that's the basement rock. And you can see the topography from the faulting where there may have been. In this case, there's not too much uplift assumed along the faults. And so this is a typical example of an exploration leapfrog geological model of an exploration system. And so, and I should just say, this is a typical example. We've built at least 10, 15 of these types of models of geothermal systems in Indonesia in the last 2 to 3 years with students, and often with very little information in terms of drilling information. And then we take in terms of the modeling geophysics, we take the 3D resistivity model, and this is on the left, and then we've sliced through it so you can actually see the low resistivity capping structure here, and we'll interpret that into the alteration. So this is we'll contour and use Leapfrog's 3D tools to interpret that low resistivity and into an alteration, and then we'll use Leapfrog to take that alteration and convert that into a model alteration. So these are actually blocks that we're now saying have alteration affecting them. And so again, we've sliced through the middle of the altered clay cap in this case. We also bring in, once we're bringing in all the information into Leapfrog, we can have this 3D visualization of the conceptual model. And this is a typical example where you've got really nice views of the geology, the temperature distribution. So you can see here is sort of the 2D temperature. This is the 200-degree contours, but you can also have nice 3D visualizations of the isosurfaces. You've got the wells you can explore in 3 dimensions. If there are wells in the exploration case, those would just be planned wells. We can see here's the alteration on or the capping structure in this model on top of the geology. And it's really, you know, you can make very nice visualizations with Leapfrog. It's easy to move through the views and do slicing and look at the structures. Here you can see, here's one of the faults here, and you can see the offsets in the geology there in that fault. And there's another fault here. You can see the offsets there. So it's a very powerful tool for visualizing and investigating the conceptual model. And this is a key as well. So taking the Leapfrog model, and then the image on the left here, I've just asked, Roni, can everyone see my mouse? I'm moving it around, but does the mouse show? Okay, great.
Yes, I can see your mouse.
Great. So on the left is the Leapfrog geological model. And with the Leapfrog's tools and our scripts, we can map that across onto the numerical model very easily, very quickly, and set up the numerical model to run very quickly. And this is the view now in TIM. This is a slice in our calibration and visualization software. So you can see it's generated the model geology, the different geologies. You can see the structures running through the model as well. You can see as well that we even capture the dip of the faults. Not all the faults have to be vertical. This is actually a dipping fault, and one here as well. And so then, and this is another view in TIM. So we can take it out of Leapfrog, generate the model quickly and easily. And we do this in an hour or two to go from a Leapfrog model to a Tough2 model. And then we're able to start running it and calibrating it in TIM. We need to apply boundary conditions, and this is where our approach is slightly different to what other groups have done around the world, but this is now very well established. This is the approach we use on all our commercial projects and all of our student projects, and it gives good, consistent results. We make the models large, much larger than the geothermal system. We try to put at least 4 to 5 kilometers between the edges of the resistivity boundaries and the edge of the model. So, and that allows us to push the boundaries of the model away from the zone of interest. We use closed-sided boundaries, so we don't apply a pressure gradient at the sides of the system. And the reason we do that is not always, but there are lots of examples of where you can get very inaccurate results by having open boundaries. And so by having closed boundaries, but moving them a long way away from your zone of interest, it's a safer approach. We apply heat and mass flux at the bottom of the model to represent the deep upflow. And so we avoid constant pressure boundary conditions at the bottom. And again, we know people do use constant pressure boundary conditions, but they should be used with caution. We find that it's much safer, again, to use the mass flux, heat flux boundary conditions because there's a chance that you can get very inaccurate results if you use constant pressure boundary conditions incorrectly. And finally, we always ensure the models are deep and move the bottom of the model as far from the lowest expected production feed zones as possible, so that again, really try to remove any boundary effects from our modeling process. Another key thing we do is that we model all the way to the surface, and we do this in all of our geothermal models now, and have done for at least 5 years. So this means we include the topography and we include the unsaturated vadose zone. And this is important because it removes our need to assume anything about a constant pressure water table. It removes the assumption of a totally impermeable cap, because in most geothermal systems, almost every geothermal system, the cap is not completely impermeable. It will be low permeability, but it's never completely impermeable. And so it removes that incorrect assumption. And it allows us to represent the interaction of the shallow pressures and boiling, which is often very important in the shallow part of the system. And particularly for today's discussion, it allows us to use shallow exploration data to calibrate the model, because the shallow zone is all included in the model. So this is an important difference about what we do. Of course, this means that we need to solve an air-water equation of state, so that we have both air and water in the model. Okay. So in terms of the model calibration, in the exploration phase, we use everything that we have. And so the more of this that has been collected and analyzed, the better. We'll be looking at the geothermometers for estimates of what the reservoir temperature is. We're particularly interested in the thermal features, where they are, whether the chemistry indicates that they're connected to the upflow or if they're outflows. We're looking at the thermal feature, the type, whether the fumaroles, hot springs, steaming grounds. This is an example from the Jarboy system and showing where the fumaroles are and the other surface features. We use the interpretation of the clay cap from the MT that can give us indications of the bottom of the clay cap profile indicates, the around 180 to 200 degree isosurface. Measurements of surface heat flow are helpful as well. And we want any information of the local water table, where the cold groundwater flows are, as well as any thermal flows. And we're looking at the geochemistry, to give indications of temperature, flow rate, chloride content, CO2 flux. We pull as much of that as we can together into the conceptual model, and then we use it for calibrating. And this is a kind of model. This is Roni's Way Island Jarboy model, and this is the kind of thing that we get as a result of the calibration. There's a geothermal system in the model. It's the temperatures we can see are around 250 degrees here if you look very closely in the reservoir, which is what we see in the geothermometers. We've got the arrows show where the surface flow rate, the flows to the surface are, and those agree well with where the geothermal features are. Here we can see the temperatures at the surface of the model, and we can see higher temperatures align. The greens show higher temperatures, and that aligns very nicely with where the measured surface features are. So of course it's not perfect because we don't have all the information, but you can see that it's clearly a good representation of the surface observations, and the resulting temperature distribution is consistent with the conceptual model. And so this has been calibrated without any information from wells. If we look at another example, this is Rotorua in New Zealand. Pat Eunice mentioned it just before, where the geothermal workshop was a few years ago. And this is more, it's a mature project, it's been utilized for a long time, but there are only shallow wells here, nothing more than about 200 meters. And so it doesn't have deep wells giving information. But again, we've built a very good model of the geothermal system based only on shallow information. And here we can see this is the model grid, and the yellow shows the areas of surface features. And if we look at our calibration results, this is showing the surface feature mass, the mass flows through the surface of the model, and you can see that the dark red shows the areas of high mass flow, and they line up very nicely with where the actual geothermal features are themselves. And then we include CO2 in this model as well, and we can measure the CO2 flux coming out of the model, the top of the model, and compare it with the CO2 flux and the chloride flux from actual measurements. And this is the results for the chloride comparison. And they align, you know, they're not perfect, but they align very well. And it's gives us a good indication that the model represents the geothermal system well, based only on shallow information. Another example is from Ōrākei Karako in New Zealand. This is work I did several years ago now with some students in New Zealand. And in this case, this is an example of the model. And there are, again, surface features and only 4 exploration wells in this case. And there was Ōrākei Karaka is interesting because there was a very detailed study of the surface features. So we had on the left, this is the surface heat flux map that was developed by this extensive exploration survey. And on the right is the model heat flux. And you can see there's a very good relationship between the two. So the model's been calibrated extensively just using those surface heat fluxes. And this is actually a plot of the modeled mass flow versus measured mass flow. So there's very good alignment in the model and the measured data. And then also there are these are cross sections showing the blue line is the shallow measurements of the groundwater level, and the dark blue shows the groundwater and liquid water in the model. So we have a really nice match between the groundwater and the measured groundwater and the modeled groundwater. So again, just shallow data. So once we've completed, once we're happy with our calibration of our exploration model, we can bring the model results back into Leapfrog, and you can include the temperature distribution that they produce in Leapfrog as well, and so you can make nice, meaningful visualizations. Again, this is Roni's work on Way Island, and you can see a nice 3D temperature distribution combined with the geological conceptual model in 3 dimensions. And this temperature distribution has been generated by the numerical model, so it's consistent. It's totally physically consistent, and it's consistent also with the design of the conceptual model because of the close coupling we use in the workflow. And then we can use this to explore any updates in the conceptual model that perhaps indicate maybe some faults are acting as barriers and some are acting as pathways slightly differently than the first interpretations. And then also we can use it to generate well plans. And the exploration well targeting, it's this idea that we now have a nice, physically accurate, consistent description of the 3D temperature distribution. We also have the good 3D visualizations of the structures, and we know from our calibration process what potentially their permeabilities might be, what to create temperature distribution consistent with the conceptual model. And so the combination of the temperature distribution in 3 dimensions and the structural, geological permeability distribution allows us then to plan wells to then target the hot, high permeability zones. And Leapfrog has really nice tools for doing that. This is just an example that Roni's generated from Leapfrog, that these can be passed directly to drilling teams to discuss and refine. The next significant improvement that we've developed for geothermal reservoir modeling is uncertainty quantification. And so we're world leaders at applying this technology, which is established mathematical techniques that come from petroleum and groundwater reservoir modeling. They're used as standard in those fields, and we're now applying them in geothermal models as well. So we've really developed this approach, and we've applied it successfully now in several of our large projects for Lahire in Papua New Guinea and in Wairaki, and also in Ohaki in New Zealand, and also in the Philippines for projects there. So we've used them, applied it successfully. And this is the idea where we generate and simulate hundreds or thousands of versions of the reservoir model that are all consistent with the conceptual model. So we start with our calibrated model, and then we look at models around that are similar and are still consistent with the conceptual model. And we're now also looking at techniques where we'll be looking at other potential versions of the conceptual model as well, so that we can look at a whole range of different versions of the reservoir model. And because of our modeling approach, the way we generate our models, and we're running them, when we're doing uncertainty quantification, we're using YWERA to run the models. We can run hundreds or thousands of models in 2 to 3 weeks. We can generate the models and run them in 2 to 3 weeks. So that means it's a game changer. You can look at meaningful statistics. So we'll generate forecast histograms of forecasts of temperature and distributions, and you can now start talking about P90, P10 statistics on your forecasts of temperature and to support the decision making. And this has been where we've applied this in our large commercial projects. Now, some of our projects are demanding that we do that every time, because management find it so useful for de-risking the project and helping with decision making. So this is an example of the kinds of things you get. So the red line might be our calibrated model, but these are model forecasts of downhole temperatures for exploration wells. We've got a high temperature one on the left, down getting to about 300 degrees, and a low temperature one only up to about 180 degrees. And you can see the red line is our calibrated model, but the gray lines are all the other models forecasts for the same downhole temperature. And so this is, in this case, I think there are about 500 models run, and all of the models you can say are within, this is about a 20-degree range, plus or minus 20 degrees. So it just gives you real confidence that, 80–90% of the models are predicting temperatures within plus or minus 20 degrees of what we're expecting. And then you can apply this to other forecasts, not just a temperature. This is work Roni's done where we can take different models and get a whole range of different forecasts for the megawatts produced. Of course, for all of these models, once you've generated the model and you can look at the temperature distribution, you can also use them to forecast forward and look at actual production scenarios and look at the megawatts produced, and again so 90% of these models are all predicting more than 20 megawatts produced over 30 years. And you can look at the average enthalpy. You can do any forecast you like, just like with any reservoir model, but instead of one forecast, you get a distribution of forecasts. So how we think about this fitting into a new geothermal exploration scheme is we have the exploration survey with all of the geosciences and all of the important information that's being gathered. We have that contributing to the conceptual model through the interpretation by the experts. And then what we see is that feeding into the 3D geological and alteration model using Leapfrog, which couples closely into reservoir modeling and this uncertainty quantification, which is what we've just been discussing, and then using that to develop well targets. So this is all part of the exploration survey. And it just means that we're using the best tools we can to try to help with that development of the well targets. And then once we start the exploration drilling, we're going to get data from the wells, which is going to refine our conceptual model. We're going to get more information from the geosciences from downhole, and we can easily then update the geological model, the numerical model, and the uncertainty quantification, and we can use them for resource assessment and evaluating the potential of the system in a systematic way. So just to summarize, so we're combining the exploration 3G data and Leapfrog and to analyze it consistently and develop a 3D visualization of the conceptual model. Then we'll create and calibrate the reservoir model to generate a preliminary temperature distribution for the geothermal system, and that will be consistent with the conceptual model. And we could do this in less than a month. Then what we'll do is use the uncertainty quantification I've described to generate a range of possible reservoir models that are consistent with the conceptual model. And we can use you run the results from all of those models to identify where the most likely high permeability and high temperature zones are, and then develop a clear target zone for exploration drilling to support the well planning with 3D visualization. And again, this second stage we can do inside a month. So we're talking about 2 months for the whole part of this part of exploration modeling. And in terms of the benefits, there are 4 really clear ones. There are lots of benefits of this approach, but 4 clear ones is by using this integrated modeling workflow, you really ensure you've got consistency between the 3G exploration data and because you're looking at it all together, and the modeling process actually enhances our knowledge as well. The reservoir modeling process and calibration process allows us to challenge and test ideas about the conceptual model, and we do it all in a coupled way. So we increase our knowledge of the system just by the process of carrying out the modeling. And so that adds value. With our fast and reliable reservoir modeling means that we can estimate the temperature distribution more accurately with less assumptions. And that's key as well. By reducing assumptions and doing this quickly, efficiently, and to best practices, you are going to end up with a more accurate representation of the temperature distribution, which also adds value. The uncertainty quantification, which systematically tests a large range of reservoir models and the possible temperature distributions, that supports robust well targeting. We by knowing a distribution of possibilities, we can avoid those zones which have a high probability of not being successful. So it reduces the risk, and this is a key part of reducing the risk. And then the last really key benefit is that this exploration reservoir modeling provides a platform for the ongoing modeling around your project. So you're going to reduce the modeling costs going forward, and it accelerates the modeling for assessing the resource potential of the system. So you're adding value by that process as well. So I just want to, before I finish, just come back and remind you again, you know, what we're talking about is this robust, proven approach, tested benchmarks, transparent and transferable approach. The transparency is important. It needs to be clear what you're doing. We want to make sure that reservoir modeling is not a black box, that people understand, all the experts can understand what's gone into the model and why it produces the results it does. So that makes this reliability, and then we make sure we're including the entire team and using evidence-based decision making, so best practice, to give our confidence in our decisions and add value and increase the success and sustainability of the project, so that the modeling really isn't just ticking a box, it really is delivering value to the project. This is just in terms of our modeling. This is the leaders of our team, which is myself and Professor Mike O'Sullivan and Roni. And in Indonesia, we also have Vicky Chandra, Anda Duhat, and Rizky Ratna doing reservoir modeling. There are other members of the team that aren't focused on modeling as well. And I want to thank them for their support and hard work. So just to conclude, the question is, how important is geothermal modeling in the exploration phase? Well, I think the answer is that, of course, you don't have to do it. There have been many, many very successful geothermal projects that didn't do modeling in the exploration phase. So it's not essential. But with our new tools, it's an opportunity to add value and reduce risk to geothermal projects during the exploration phase. So let's take the opportunity together to make those improvements. Terima kasih. So if there are any questions, I'd be very happy to discuss them.
Thank you very much, John, for your presentation. Maybe because Rosalind have to go to another Zoom session, we can take a photo session before we go to discussion with John. I think for all participants, I need you to turn on your video and take photo session. Mbak Vanessa, can you help me to doing the photo session, documentation?
Okay, okay.
Okay, you can start, Mbak Vanessa.
Everybody is ready?
Yep.
Okay. Let's take a photo together. 1, 2, 3. Okay, one more. Okay, one more. 1, 2, 3.
For pages.
Wait, one more. One more. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Ronnie, you can start again the presentation.
Yeah. Thank you, Mbak Vanessa. Thanks, Rosalind, for your time and valuable insights for us. I know you need to go to another session. Thanks for your time, for joining us with until this late evening in your time. I hope we can doing another webinar with Rosalind again in the future. Thanks, Rosalind.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
you're welcome.
Thank you, Professor.
See you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we will continue to the discussion session with John. So for every participant who has question to John, you can directly ask to John using raise hand feature in the Zoom.
Okay. Mas Roni.
Oh,
okay. Monggo Pak, silakan Pak Yunus tadi.
Pak Yunus, sure. Go by
Okay.
Yunus.
Thank you, Mas Rani. Hello, John. I'm Yunus Daud.
Hi, Eunice.
Yeah, from University of Indonesia. Nice to see you again. Yeah, okay. This is a really interesting presentation. I enjoyed. Yeah, actually a little bit longer, but I enjoying your presentation. Okay, yeah. Modeling, reservoir modeling for exploration phase, in the exploration phase is really interesting. Usually reservoir modeling is placed after drilling. But this is a good idea, and I think this really inspiring for us. How important is it? Okay, you said it's very, very important. Yeah, I agree with your statement. Okay, that first. John, related to the modeling, yeah, actually the modeling is really lay on the conceptual model. Okay, so it's depend really on the how the conceptual model build up. This is very, very important. And yeah, I'm geophysicist. Yeah, actually during exploration stage, where the drilling is not yet drilled, no data, no drilling data, and the subsurface information really lay on geophysics.
Yes,
Okay, do you
it's a
agree on
key.
this? Yeah.
We agree. Good MT is very important.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. You could understand what I mean. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Actually, I wrote a paper and published in Rotorua in New Zealand Geothermal Workshop. Probably we can remind my paper relating to drilling. Okay, empty versus drilling. This is very important
Yes.
because many empty data, many 3D modeling resulting as not okay, we call not a realistic data because of the quality of time series data, raw data, and then the quality of processing, and then modeling, I mean the 3D inversion, and finally the result of the 3D inversion is depend on the process from time series to 3D inversion. And we have many cases related to this matter. And I would like to say that the conceptual model really lay on the empty modeling. So proper processing and proper empty modeling will give a best empty modeling, and later on this will give important information for the reservoir modeler.
Absolutely.
Yes, to build a conceptual model. So okay, I just would like to remind us that this is very important. So
I couldn't agree more. It's critical that the geoscience inputs are done to best practices as well. As you described, Eunice, it's all of the geophysics. It should be clear how the inversion was done for MT, and the inversion parameters that were used, so that people can see that it's being done to best practices. And as you say, because it's complicated, and you can get different inversions if people don't do it correctly. Yeah. One of the things that I would say as well is that when one of the advantages for doing the reservoir modeling in the exploration phase is we can actually help identify when potentially the MT inversion may not be as good as it can be. Because you can, some of my students where they're using perhaps older MT inversions, they find, well, hang on a second, the clay cap's got a hole in it, or it's not big enough, or it's in the wrong position, and I can't get a geothermal system to form properly in the model. The temperature won't, it's leaking out, or it's moving in the wrong place. And we look back and look at the MT and think, actually, maybe that hasn't been done as well as it could be. And so this is where there's the feedback between the reservoir modeling and the geosciences is really helpful. Yeah. And even, you know, and sometimes, as of course, you know, even when everything's done in the geophysics to best practices, there's still uncertainty, like you said and you showed in your paper, the difference between alteration and MT, there's always differences even when it's done well. And one of the things that we can test with the uncertainty quantification is we can test exactly where that boundary is in alteration around what the MT may say. If you look even in this picture that I drew here in the slide here, this is the interpreted alteration, and it doesn't line up exactly with the low resistivity. So there's been other factors, like you discussed in your paper in Rotorua. There are other factors which affect the alteration and can affect the resistivity, like cold water inflows and things like that, that we can investigate with the uncertainty quantification process. So yeah, but you're absolutely right. The job it's critical to be getting best practice input from geophysics, but there is this feedback loop, and there are ways of testing the natural uncertainty in the geosciences as well, which we can do with the exploration and modeling.
Right. Yeah. Actually, that's a good idea. The uncertainty quantification is, I think, it's really a good idea to reduce the risk. Okay. Sorry, a little bit information. There is other consideration, like okay, we should mention the name in Tulehu, you know, Tulehu in Maluku, in the eastern Indonesia. There have been 4 wells. Yeah, actually, the old well one is 5 wells already drilled there, and the reservoir is not there. Yeah, this is interesting. So actually, I would like to discuss with you probably through email or using Zoom or something that after that. So drilling for wells is not so successful. Actually, the outflow zone, the mother source is not really at the exploration drilling target, but a little bit shifting to the southern at the mount of Eriwakang. That's interesting. So, okay, one's empty, and the second one is understanding of the geothermal system there. So, yeah.
And one of the primary reasons I'd be really interested to discuss it further with you and look at the details. But one of the primary reasons why geothermal systems shift is, as you know, the topography can be a big factor, and if the topography, and also the geology, of course, but topography, including the topography accurately and modeling the topography in the geothermal model, can actually indicate how far the upflow might shift in a much more accurate way than if you're estimating pressure distributions at the top of the clay cap. That's one of the fundamental differences of modeling all the way to the surface. Gives you a lot, removes some of the assumptions you have to make, and it allows you to much more accurately represent the shift in geothermal systems due to topography. So that could be a factor in that case.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Actually, this is interesting. So, but other audience, I think, will give you some other questions. So, thank you very much, John. I really interested in your presentation today. Hopefully, the modeling within exploration stage, I think that's a good idea to develop. Yeah, hopefully we could also collaborate for further collaboration, and then reducing exploration drilling risk. This is very important. Okay, thank you, John. Thank
Thanks,
you,
Pak Yunus. That's
Tony.
great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Terima kasih Pak Yunus. Maybe we have Pak Hasani next.
Okay, thank you, Mas Roni. Hi, John.
Hi, Kasani.
Okay, nice to meet you virtually again.
Great to see you. Great to see you.
Okay, well, I have one question. Back to a bit long time ago, during the era of Derek Freestone, I got like one work done by Teklu Hadgu, and of course with the Derek Freestone. They work on,
Aku menyiapkan Anda sudah menanggapi, Anda hanya dapat mengisi forum satu kali, sekali berarti tidak usah dua kali. Kan biasanya kalau nama panitianya.
Okay.
You can continue, Pak.
Okay, they incorporated between a reservoir, model with the Wilbur model. If I'm not mistaken, they use the early version of TAF2 and the early version of Welsim, maybe. Okay, so they try to couple with between TAF2, something like Welsim. So what's actually the benefits or the role, or maybe it's something like unuseful on incorporating wellbore with the reservoir model. So what do you think, John?
Oh, it's very useful, and we've been working on a project recently doing exactly that, which is getting some really nice results. It's not always essential. Depends on how the wells are behaving. If the wells are fairly steady and the reservoir is fairly steady, then the coupling with the wellbore simulation isn't essential, but it's very helpful in cases where there are changes going on in feed zones in particular for multi-feed wells where there are changes happening in the feeds. It can be really useful to have that wellbore coupling. Obviously, it's something that we think about during production modeling rather than during the exploration modeling. So it's not something that I've discussed here. But and the other thing is, so coupling with the wellbore simulation can be very useful and important. It's an area we're working in and have got some good results in recently. You need to be careful because it's good for understanding when the changes are not too dramatic, but for some situations, like if you get a shallow feed zone that starts downflowing into the deep feed zone, which is not an uncommon problem, it does happen. There really aren't any wellbore simulations that can predict that properly because that's a very complicated type of flow. So just be careful. So my bottom line is, yes, I think it's good, it's important in certain situations, but it's not a magic bullet. It can't always predict some of the more complicated problems that occur, like downflowing. And so we're actually also working on a new wellbore simulation that we've had a lot of success with, which can simulate downflows, simultaneous downflow and upflow. So downflow of cold water around the edge of the wellbore while steam is still flowing up. So so we can actually now simulate that problem, but we haven't coupled that yet with reservoir modeling. So this is all getting quite advanced, and yeah, so the bottom line, yes, I think it's important, very important in some situations. Yeah, but production modeling, obviously. So yeah.
Okay. So how the idea to incorporate between them? So we run separately, or we can directly give the input into we couple directly between the wellbore and the reservoir simulator, or we run
there are different options, and it depends on the situation. So even when we don't couple them directly, we run wellbore simulations separately to establish parameters for deliverability models. So that's a decoupled approach. We have a version of AU Tough 2 which couples directly with an above ground steam field and wellbore modeling system with Mauro Perini software. So that's working well now. And so that's directly coupled. So at the two ends, you've got a direct coupling and a decoupled. And Mauro's approach will let you do a semi-decoupled approach where you can specify how often you want to rerun the wellbore simulation to update results. So there's a sort of a semi-coupled. So there's a full range of them. And yeah, we can discuss the details of that offline. I think it'd be really interesting.
Okay, thank you, John.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you, Pak Hasani. Thank you, John. I think there is a last question from Mas Eko Hari. Mas Eko, maybe you can turn on the video and ask to John directly. Hello, Mas Eko. Okay, I will read the question from Mas Eko. Mas Eko Hari from Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources. Thank you, Rosalind and John, for the presentation. Based on your experiences, is it common to conduct reservoir simulation prior to exploration drilling, since there will not be any pressure and temperature profile available? Is it common to use, say, isothermometer from geothermometer geochemistry as temperature calibration? And could you suggest another better or strong calibration parameter specifically in greenfield?
So I think the modeling technology that I've discussed today has really only been available in the last 5 to 10 years, really the last 5 years. So in terms of systems that have gone from exploration to development, I don't think it has been applied yet. I think, and so what we're proposing is what we're showing is we've shown on several projects now that it's possible. And so it's an opportunity to add value to the project. And I think we've demonstrated now with a number of projects with students and also research projects that you can build good models only with exploration data. And what we'd really like is the opportunity to work on a project together that then gets developed to show the value that it adds. And I think that's really important. I think, you know, we've as I said, we've now demonstrated enough examples that we can do this and do it successfully. We want to show the results, and to show the results, we need to partner with people who are developing systems and show the value that doing the early exploration modeling adds. So I have no doubt we can do the modeling and it works, but we want to work on an example, to work on a project to show the value. Now, to answer the second part of your question, without the pressure and temperature data, what are we using instead? And the key thing, as Pak Yunus described, really is the resistivity and the geophysics that helps us identify the likely location of the geothermal system. And so that, combined with geothermometers and the geochemistry from any surface features, help us identify where the likely location of the temperature distribution. Now, even if there are no surface features, it's possible to still identify the likely location from the MT, and then that's where the less information you have is then the greater the uncertainty. And so that's where the uncertainty quantification, where we would generate lots of different models that could represent the possible temperature distribution, is very, very valuable. So it's this combination. The more information you have, the less uncertainty there is. If you have less information, there's more uncertainty. So you'll be looking at a wider selection of possible models. But the key is that by using the approach that we're talking about, the uncertainty quantification is carried out on reservoir models that are physically consistent. And so you know that the temperature distributions that they are estimating, they may not represent the real temperature distribution because there are a range of them. So some might and others won't. But all of the temperature distributions that they are predicting are physically consistent with the models that generated them. So you remove the possibility of physically impossible temperature distributions. So that's a powerful check that reduces the risk of inconsistent temperature distributions in your exploration models.
Okay, thank you very much, John, for your answer. Yeah, there is another question from Imam. I think, yeah, actually this is the same question that I will try to ask to you. Maybe you can elaborate more about uncertainty quantification and what is the difference with Monte Carlo. Because usually in Indonesia, we still use Monte Carlo for P90 for define P90, P10, and P50. And what is the basic difference, the main difference between uncertainty quantification that you develop with Monte Carlo?
So Monte Carlo is a very, very simple form of uncertainty quantification for geothermal reservoirs. So essentially, instead of running a numerical flow model that calculates a temperature distribution and a pressure distribution that's physically consistent with a conceptual model, in Monte Carlo, you simply estimate the area and temperature and some extraction parameters. So you have a very, very simple model that has maybe 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 parameters. And then you do a Monte Carlo, which is a random sampling from those 3 or 4 parameters to give you different estimates of the heat storage and the resource potential. So when I give my lectures at the Geothermal Institute about reservoir modeling, one of the first slides I talk about is there are many different types of models. And a stored heat calculation is essentially the very simplest type of reservoir model. It's not even one-dimensional, it's not two-dimensional, it's not three-dimensional, it is zero-dimensional. It just assumes that there is essentially one block of heat or maybe a few layers of heat. So it's a very, very simple reservoir model with no flow between the blocks or anything. And so when you're doing Monte Carlo on the simplest possible version of a reservoir model, which may not be even physically possible, So there's a wide range of, it's a very old tool. People have been doing stored heat calculations for 100 years probably, or at least 60. So it's a very old tool, which doesn't mean there's anything wrong with stored heat calculations as a very preliminary guess. But there's no guarantee that a stored heat calculation is accurate or even consistent with the conceptual model. What we're doing is in our uncertainty quantification, we're generating large three-dimensional heat and mass flow models, which are consistent with the conceptual model and physically possible because we're solving the governing equations of fluid and heat flow underground. So we know that they're physically possible. And we're generating hundreds or thousands of those types of models and running all of them and estimating the temperature and pressure distribution from them. So we do the same sort of random sampling, the same sort of Monte Carlo sampling as you're used to, but we apply it to a much more accurate, much more physically realistic representation of the geothermal model. And we can do that because we can now run a model with 30,000, 40,000 blocks in it in a matter of minutes, which used to take hours and hours or days. So now we can do that so much faster. We can do a Monte Carlo on a real model rather than doing a Monte Carlo on a very, very basic model. Okay, so that's the key difference. And the advantage is not only are the models, all of the thousands of models we sample physically consistent, but you can take all kinds of forecasts from them, not just the temperature, but you can actually do production modeling with each one of the 1,000 and do predictions of other things such as, so this is temperature, but you can also do predictions of power production or average enthalpy. You know, you can do any prediction you like out of the models, which obviously a stored heat calculation, you can't do any predictions apart from the heat. So you get a lot more information this way. And also another key point is not only are they more accurate, you can do other forecasts, but it removes assumptions as well. One of the key assumptions in a standard Monte Carlo stored heat approach is the recovery factor. And as you all know, the recovery factor is a very badly constrained parameter. It can vary from a few percent to 50%. It's a terrible parameter, and it's a really, really important parameter on changing the results of your Monte Carlo. So what we, in numerical modeling, what we call it, it's a very sensitive parameter. The results are very sensitive to the recovery factor, and no one knows what it should be. So in the modeling approach, the uncertainty quantification we're talking about, there is no recovery factor. We don't use one. We don't need to, because when we start talking about how much energy can be extracted, we put real wells into each of the thousands of models and we see what they will produce. And those wells, of course, you don't know exactly what the well will be like till it's drilled, but we have much, much better information about typical well behavior than we do about typical recovery factors. So it's about the uncertainty quantification we're using is much more realistic representation of the system, reduces the number of assumptions we have to make, and it removes that key assumption about recovery factor. Yes, you can do a stored heat Monte Carlo in a couple of hours, and it takes us 2 weeks, 3 weeks to do the uncertainty quantification. So it's much longer to do what we do, but there's so much more value in it. So I think that's the key difference.
Thank you very much, John. I hope Mas Imam already get the answer for the uncertainty quantification method. Yes, it's definitely a new method, and it will be very, very useful for us since what we do in the uncertainty quantification, we run the full-scale reservoir model, not a store head, as John mentioned before, and we run 1,000 parameter applied to the reservoir model, and we basically make 1,000 of models, and we run each model in a full-scale reservoir simulation using Wawera, and it only takes a minute to run it, and that's the key difference with Monte Carlo simulation. Thank you very much, John. I think that's the last question for our discussion session. Next, we will go to the certificate. We will give a certificate of appreciation to the speakers because we only have John right now. We will give the certificate to John. And if there is still any question from participants, you can directly contact John through his LinkedIn or email, or you can contact me also regarding any question about reservoir modeling. Mas Wakit and Mbak Vanessa, I give the floor to you.
Okay. What a great presentation from both of our speakers. Thank you, John, and thank you, Professor Rosalind. We really appreciate you being here. This time, I would like to call the speakers, since only John is here, to receive a certificate from us. Kindly please, Mr. Roni, to pass on the certificate to Dr. John, to our honorable outstanding speaker today.
Sure. I will bring the hard copies to Auckland soon.
Okay.
Thank you very much. It's been my absolute pleasure. Thank you very much,
Thank
everyone.
you, John. Thank you, John.
Okay, Mbak Vanessa, maybe you can close the webinar session for today.
Do we need to take a picture again, or it's okay with the previous one?
Up to you.
Up to me. Oh, it's okay then. Okay. Before we leave, picture again? No. Okay. Thanks again for everyone for joining us today. Thanks also to Professor Rosalind and Dr. John. Nice to meet you all. We will see you again next time for another upcoming Geothermal webinar series from us. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, John, for your time.
Thank you so much, John.
Thank you, John.
Thank you for all
John.
participants.
Thank you, Pak Roni, Mas Roni.
Pak Yunus,
sehat,
Thank you, John.
Pak Susilo, Pak Hasani, terima kasih semuanya yang hadir ya.
Assalamualaikum,
Terima kasih semuanya.
Pak Sani.
Salam, Bro.